What's up, estate planning attorneys? So one thing that we hear all the time is it's time to automate your law firm. And while this sounds great on paper, it is much harder than you think it is. And also, I want to show you a few examples of firms that are some of the biggest and most successful firms out there and what they're doing. I also want to show you an example of an automated law firm and how they perform. And then I want to back this up with some data on how a traditional firm runs from a sales and revenue generation standpoint and how an e-commerce firm would run from a sales and revenue generation standpoint. And then I'll throw in a few examples along the way of experiences we've had throughout our business career. So this will be slightly longer of a video. So if you are considering automating your firm, this is going to be a really cool video. And in some cases, it is better to systematize than it is to automate. All right, and we'll talk about that throughout this video as well. Let's go ahead and dive into a screen share and look at the data. All right, so before we dive into this fun data that I have here prepared and a few other examples of law firms and automated law firms and all that stuff, I want to give you a few examples and I want to take some time to put yourself in your customer's shoes. So if you've ever bought a car, when was the last time you actually bought one online and didn't want to go to the dealership? Now, there are a handful of people out there who are early adopters and will buy a car online, but the vast majority of the population actually wants to go in there. They want to talk to somebody. They want to try and bargain. They want to feel the car. They want to drive it, all this different stuff. So when someone is trying to buy an estate plan or a trust, they need to pick your brain. They need to understand the product. It takes a lot of education around the product. And so selling it online already presents an issue with that unless you have live support, chat agents, someone available for calls, and all that stuff. The other thing I want to point your attention to, so before we were actually a legal specific company, Eric and myself worked in the insurance industry, and we used to market for the biggest carriers out there, including Aetna, AAA, Humana, a huge amount of carriers, like the biggest carriers in the game. And we worked in the Medicare space, and it was everybody's dream to be able to sell a Medicare policy online. And we were actually we were the first agency to ever do that. We sold Medicare policies online to consumers, so we know exactly what it takes to actually automate a sales process like that. And we did this for Aetna, and we did it for a company. I actually can't disclose the company. It was another company that sold a more off-brand type Medicare product. But companies were so into this that they would raise millions of dollars to try and automate this sales process. And ultimately, they didn't really work because the cost per acquisition was too high and there wasn't enough profit left on the table after all the marketing that went into selling a product online. Agent sales still ruled that space. So if you didn't understand what I said just there, that's okay. I'm going to walk through some data on what traditional selling from a law firm standpoint looks like versus e-commerce or shopping online, which is what the automated world is looking to do. So in a traditional selling capacity, I have a bunch of numbers here. I'm going to walk through them one by one. This is what a typical marketing campaign will look like in a month. So let's just say that we've generated 100 clicks to your website or your landing page or your funnel, whatever it is, 100 clicks. And this is 100 visitors, 100 unique people. And each of those people cost $8 to bring to your funnel. And that is the average rate, across the United States between Google and Facebook. $8 is a pretty safe assumption. And every single one of those people, 25% of them are actually going to turn into a lead. So they're actually going to fill out a form or call your firm. So there's our 25% conversion rate. What that's going to get us is 25 leads. So out of 100 people, 25 of them have raised their hand and said, I want more information or I want to schedule a consult. Now, not every single one of those people is actually going to book. We're actually going to assume a 70% booking rate right here, which is pretty average. You can get better than that. You can get a lot worse, but that is what I expect you to be at. So if 25 of those people, if 70% of them book, you're going to get about 18 appointments on your calendar. Now, let's say that 70% of those people who have booked will actually show to your consultation because not everybody's going to show up to your consultation. So out of those 18 people, 12 of them have actually showed up and are going to hear what you have to say. Now, out of those 12 people, let's say you close 30% of them, which this is actually a pretty low closing rate. Most attorneys close higher than this. I'm just being conservative. So if you close 12 of your appointments, or if you close 30% of your 12, you're going to get 4 sales that month. Now, let's assume that you are selling a trust or something along the lines of that for $3,500. You're going to get about $12,000 in revenue off of that, off of your $800 in spend. And where this $800 came from is the amount of clicks times the cost per click. So that was a lot of math. You may want to rewatch that in case it was too much, but those are typically how a marketing campaign, like those are how the statistics are going to play out month over month. And we do this for almost 100 clients every single month, and this is very, very realistic. Now, let's talk about e-commerce. And e-commerce is pretty much when someone buys something completely online, whether it's an easy transaction or it's, they go and buy a dress or they buy a t-shirt, whatever it is. That's what e-commerce is. Now, typically, if you're trying to sell something as complicated as an estate plan, it may involve like a video or a funnel or something like that. But e-commerce conversion rates are much, much lower than lead generation conversion rates. And what I mean by that is this is a lead generation conversion rate. And to give you an idea, the average e-commerce conversion rate is 2.63%. So this is pulled straight off of Google. And when they pull this number, they're factoring in things like t-shirt sales, dresses, all kinds of stuff like that. Not necessarily higher ticket products. So selling a $3,500 estate plan is going to be a lot harder than selling a t-shirt. So we're going to use some of Legalzoom's numbers when it comes to revenue and things like that. So let's go back to our sheet here. Let's say in the same exact scenario that we get 100 clicks and they cost us $8 a piece. So 100 visitors, $8 a piece. And let's assume that our conversion rate is 2%, which is pretty generous for something like this, but we're going to assume 2%. It's slightly lower than the average e-commerce conversion rate out there. So that would get you about 2 sales. Now our sale value is not going to be the same $3,500 because this is all self-fulfilled. They're not talking to anybody, it's automated, and I'm giving you a little bit more on the sale value based on what Legalzoom is charging. So Legalzoom, to sell a living trust, is charging $329 for a trust. It's $179 for a will. And your client or your potential client is going to compare you to Legalzoom and ask you, well, why aren't you as cheap as Legalzoom? So we're going to use these numbers. So your average sale value is $500 in this instance, and your total revenue off of 2 sales would be $1,000. And you spent $800 acquiring these 2 sales. So you're positive $200 in this scenario. And this does not include things like remarketing or email or webinars or any other types of advertising you're doing to drive these results. This is just the initial touch point, and not many people convert on the initial touch point. So you can already see that this is very, very difficult to pull off in this type of environment. It's not quite there. If your market was interested in buying online, then they would be buying online, but they're not quite there yet. They are more in the zone of, let me go talk to the attorney, let me go pick their brain, let me find out what this actually is. And so before you say, well, you don't really know what you're talking about, we're going to look at Legalzoom here. Again, so Legalzoom is kind of the leader in this space. Now, the difference between your firm and Legalzoom is Legalzoom has funding. They have tons of funding, public funding. They're a public company, and they can afford to be unprofitable for quite some time. Whereas your firm needs to make money now. So back when we were in the insurance industry and we were doing this for these companies, they were unprofitable for years. They had private equity firms behind them that spent millions of dollars on this technology, on the advertising to prove a concept and be pioneers in the market. So they could afford to be unprofitable. And Legalzoom is no different. They can afford to be unprofitable and do this and build a massive brand. And eventually they have a base of customers that they can upsell, they can cross-sell, they can sell that database to people and make money in different ways. They can also make money by selling data. There's a lot of different ways these people can monetize, but they all have that. They had that all in mind when they started this model, and they knew they could be unprofitable. And to kind of show you a little bit more about that, this is Legalzoom's earnings reports for the last 4 quarters. You can see that the net income in September was negative $39 million. So talk about unprofitable. They lost $39 million. In June, they lost $38 million. And in March, they lost $9.82 million. So 3 months running now, they've lost millions and millions of dollars, and they're still not profitable. So it just goes to show you that this is the biggest company leading the pack in this industry, and not even they are running at a profit. Now, they can afford to do that, but most firms cannot afford to run unprofitably for more than a month or 2. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe to our channel by clicking the button below. And if you want us to help you grow your law firm, you can book a call with me in the comments section below. Let's get back to the video. Something to consider there when people are saying Legalzoom is doing it. They have a race to the bottom product, and they are not profitable. Now, I want to talk about one last firm. Now, this is not in the estate planning niche, This guy is Morgan & Morgan. He is the biggest personal injury firm in the United States. He loves saying it. You can see it's right there on top of his website. And he's one of the most successful personal injury attorneys out there, if not the most successful. And one thing you'll learn about Morgan & Morgan is, number one, he spends a ton of money on advertising. So he spends millions of dollars every single month. And the other thing is when you drive around Florida, Georgia, in fact, he's in most states now. When you drive around, you'll see buildings, say Morgan & Morgan, and all of those buildings are call centers. And what's funny about that is he is the biggest guy on the block. He could maybe automate some of his processes, but instead he has created systems around his lead intake, and he has call centers calling his leads day in and day out, ready to respond, email, text message, follow up. So he is doing the boring work and getting amazing results because he has not tried to automate something that should be systematized. So I want to leave you with that last tidbit that this is a guy who's making millions and millions of dollars, and he is doing it the old-fashioned way. He gets a lead, and he calls the lead. He schedules a consultation. They come in, they talk, boom, they close the business. And he does that over and over and over again, and it is extremely profitable for him. So if you have any questions about automating your firm or you want to talk more about this, feel free to leave a comment below, and I thank you so much for your time.